Now, if you've been looking at content about the new facelifted Perodua Myvi, you would have no doubt seen our review of that car. The problem is with a lot of our reviews, we are usually given the flagship models, and it's very easy to wax lyrical about the car that has all the bells and whistles. And sure, for the Myvi 1.5AV, it's nice to have things like level 2 semi-autonomy and lane keep assist and blind spot monitoring and leather seats with a lot of red and a nice big touchscreen. But the fact of the matter is, not everyone wants that, and more importantly, not everyone can afford that. The problem is, when the Myvi first came out, if you wanted to recommend one to a friend, on the basis of safety, you could only recommend the 1.5 advanced model because that was the only one that came with ASA. However, with the introduction of ASA 2.0 for the Perodua Myvi, advanced safety assist began to proliferate further down the line, and you could actually get the 1.3X with ASA. But now, with this facelift, ASA 3.0 is now available on even the most basic model, which is what we have here, the price champion of sorts. My name is AIMAN ABDULLAH. This is Malaysian Motoring. This is our review of the Perodua Myvi 1.3G with advanced safety assist. Now, although the 1.3G is the basic model for the Myvi lineup, it certainly doesn't look basic from the outside. The only differences are you don't get the daytime running lights that we saw on the 1.5 models. You also don't get the body kit and the rather jutting out chin spoiler that you got on the 1.5 models, and that's about it. You still get the same full LED headlights with automatic high beam, which is included in ASA 3.0 as standard. You also get the new grille and so on and so forth. Down the side, you get 14-inch alloy wheels of a single tone design, not the more flowery 15-inch dual tone alloy wheel design. You still get the black wing mirror caps, which is standard across the range, as I mentioned before. You don't get chrome door handles, and that's about it on the side. No side skirts also, that's also reserved for the 1.5 models. At the back, you don't get a spoiler, which I never realized made such a difference about the design of the Myvi. Without a spoiler, it looks kind of naked. You also don't get the additional body kit at the back, although that's part of a gear up package. And again, that's about it. What's very interesting about the 1.3G is it actually doesn't come with any sort of badging. So it just says Myvi on the back, whereas for the X, H and AV models, obviously you get a variant designation. I guess for the 1.3G, it doesn't really matter. Now, because this is still ultimately a Myvi, it doesn't compromise on practicality. You still have a decent amount of room back here with a full-size spare tire underneath, and the rear seats still full flat 60/40. The rear seats can also be reclined to stage in order to improve your comfort or to ever so slightly improve rear space. Now, enough about that. Let's go talk about the interior, where again we can see more of the essentials and less of the faffery. Now, the interior of the Myvi 1.3G is again more of what you need rather than what you want. So you get a very basic radio head unit with a USB input, but nothing else. There is no auxiliary, there is no Bluetooth, so make of that what you will. You also lose all the buttons on the steering wheel, and you also lose the leather wrapping that you get in the 1.5 models. This is just a polyurethane steering wheel, but everything else is broadly similar. You don't get the red accents, which I'm kind of grateful for, but you still get some red on the seats, although it's sort of woven into the fabric, which I must admit looks quite good. I'd rather have this over the garish black and red seats that you get in the advanced model. Everything else, however, is exactly how you'd expect it. Oh, you also lose the toll card reader. Why am I only remembering this now? But like I said, everything else is the same. So you still get the same amount of USB ports, you still get the same amount of cubby holes, you still get the same amount of practical bottle and cup holders. Everything else in here, like I said, is the same. One other key difference, which I only just remembered, is that you also get a different set of dials for this car. Everything beneath the 1.5 AV gets a different head unit. It's a different style of dials, which is actually taken from the Perodua Ativa X, which has a multi-info display in the middle, but it's just electrochromatic, it's not color. So you lose a lot of options, admittedly, but what it does do is solve a major issue with the pre-facelift model, which was the electrochromatic screen in the pre-facelift models used to give you the option to either see your fuel consumption or your odometer, not both. And as a result, I personally have ever so slightly overshot my service interval because I keep it on the fuel consumption reading as opposed to the odometer, and I didn't realize I'd actually gone past the service interval. Now you no longer have that issue because the trip and the multi-info display are actually split. There's a line in between, so you can actually choose to see whichever one you want. Now, you also lose out on folding mirrors, which is not really that big of a deal, but what's most important is you don't lose out on safety. This car, like I said, comes with ASA 3.0 with some Perodua Smart Drive Assist features. So you actually have lane keep assist, lane departure warning, autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian and cyclist detection, and automatic high beam as standard, which makes this a very comprehensively equipped affordable car. At just under 48,000 ringgit with the ongoing SST exemption, admittedly, this makes it the safest sub 50,000 ringgit car, the N. And like I said, it's very impressive that Perodua has been able to package all of this in given the price point, and I'm sure that it will go some way in making Malaysian roads a little bit safer. Now, because this is still ultimately a Myvi, albeit one that's more affordably spec'd, it does mean that you still have a lot of space in the back. Leg and headroom is still excellent. There's still plenty of space back there. You still get cubby holes in the back of the seats, as well as pockets on the side of the front seats, and you also get an anti-snatch theft hook. You do lose out on the USB port on the side of the driver's seat, however, which means if you do want to charge something up, you will have to run a cable from the front to the passengers at the rear. But otherwise, things are still pretty good back there. Now, what's curious, or what we were curious about with this car is, of course, the fact that with the 1.3 engine and the smaller wheels, would this car drive differently from the 1.5 advanced model that we drove before? Now, we're going to talk about that in the next segment, obviously. Now, driving the Perodua Myvi 1.3 is a really interesting experience. The thing is, for motoring journalists, normally we drive flagship vehicles, right? The best of the range. Very rarely do we get the opportunity to drive cars like this, but I guess with the Myvi it's really important that we sample vehicles like this, because there will be buyers out there who place a great amount of emphasis on affordability, and that is exactly what this car is about. So the biggest change obviously is the engine. So instead of a 1.5 litre, this runs on just the 1.3 litre, which has slightly lower outputs, but it's still paired to the same DCVT automatic. The other difference, of course, is in terms of safety, where this car obviously doesn't get the full level 2 semi-autonomy suite that you get with a 1.5 advanced model. Now, in terms of this engine, it's actually a really great mill. For starters, it's a little bit quieter than the 1.5, and although it takes a little bit more time to get up to cruising speed on the motorway, once you do, this engine quietens down quite nicely. In town, it's quite peppy and it is still very responsive, and overall, I feel like the harshness and noise from the engine from the engine bay for the 1.3 is significantly lower from the 1.5, which is a really interesting juxtaposition. Then on top of that, there is the fact that the 1.3 models ride on slightly smaller wheels, which means that you get a slightly better cushioned ride, especially over primary bumps. The primary ride in this car is a little bit better than the 1.5 models as a result of those wheels. Of course, lateral grip is slightly reduced, again because of those wheels, but it's not really that big of a deal. These are not corner carving cars anyway. And when you're cruising at speed, like I said, doing about 110 thereabouts, there's actually very little in terms of engine noise. All you hear is wind and road noise, which is okay. It's not great. It's certainly not as quiet as, say, the Proton Iris, but it is still pretty quiet in here. In terms of comfort, well, these seats are relatively comfortable. Their design is still otherwise unchanged from the pre-facelift model, so there's not really much to talk about there. In terms of the steering and handling, it's still broadly similar to how it was before. The steering wheel is very assisted and it's quite light. It does try to weight up a little bit on the motorway, but you're still going to be doing quite a few inputs in order to get the car to sort of stay in the middle of the lane. But that said, talking about being in the middle of the lane, the active safety systems in this car do help quite a bit. So even though this car comes in at just under 48,000 ringgit, it still comes with ASA 3.0 and some Perodua Smart Drive Assist features, including lane keep assist, lane departure warning, automatic high beam, autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian and cyclist detection, and pedal miss operation alert, as well as front vehicle departure alert. And the thing is, again, for a sub 50,000 ringgit car to offer these sort of features, it's not an Axia with the refinement of the Myvi. It really does make a huge difference. To me, at least, it means that for the first time, I can actually look at a Myvi that beyond just the 1.5 advanced model. If I were strapped for cash, if I were on a tighter budget, this car does almost everything I want of it. And safety is a huge thing for me. And so in order to be able to have all of these safety features at such an affordable price point is truly eye-opening. Of course, when you compare it to the competitors in the sub 50,000 ringgit range, you've got basically nothing. Proton, for example, chose to facelift the Iris and instead give it the Iris Active and the new head unit and stuff like that, because they said that their customers prefer that sort of thing over active safety, or so they claim. And so as a result, it means that the Myvi, especially this 1.3G model with ASA, is basically unrivaled. If you're looking for the safest way for 5 people to travel for the least amount of money, this is basically it. And talking about affordability, of course, there is the fact that because you're running the smaller engine, it is a lot more affordable. Now, I've done almost 450 kilometers on a single tank in this car, averaging a little over 17 kilometers per litre. Now, bear in mind, I don't drive particularly economically. I do drive at speed. I did have to drive this car on the motorway at speed in order to figure out what that experience is like. I did drive through several traffic jams throughout my 3 or 4 day stint with this car. So this is pretty much a real world estimate. Of course, Perodua claims this car will do 22 kilometers per litre, which I'm sure it can in a lab, but in the real world, I think 17 kilometers per litre average is still pretty good. This is still definitely better than the competition. And when you take into account the fact that, again, this is still the Myvi, which is a car that Perodua considers to be its product flagship. And so with the build quality and the refinement and all of that that's on offer, and of course the practicality that the Myvi has always been known for, it makes this a pretty unbeatable package in my opinion. I could very easily recommend this car to someone who's looking to spend under 50 grand on a car that they can use day to day, a car that they can grow with especially. Of course, ideally you'd want to buy the flagship, but just because you buy this, it doesn't feel like you're being shortchanged, except in one very critical area. Now, when I got into this car, the lack of buttons on the steering wheel, that's fine. The fact the steering wheel is polyurethane, that's fine. What bothers me is the head unit. The lack of auxiliary input and the lack of Bluetooth connectivity, I feel in this day and age is slightly criminal. Now, Perodua places great emphasis on safety, and the fact that the lack of Bluetooth automatically means a lack of Bluetooth hands-free connectivity means that it's either you're not going to be taking calls when you're driving, or worse, you'll be handling your phone when you're behind the wheel, which is definitely not ideal, illegal in fact. So I do feel that Bluetooth should have been an inclusion, but genuinely, aside from that, there is nothing to complain about in this car. It's affordable to buy, it's affordable to run, and it is incredibly safe. I do genuinely like this thing. In fact, in my opinion, I actually like this more than the 1.5 Advance. The flagship models are always going to do very well. That's normally how it goes. And in fact, with Myvi buyers, the majority of buyers choose to buy the advanced model or the more expensive models. But for me, what really impresses is this car, the 1.3G. Despite the fact that it was built to a price point, it does not feel cheap in here at all. And the fact that Perodua did not cheap out on safety again underlines the fact that safety should not be a luxury. And I absolutely love what Perodua is doing here, and I really do genuinely like this car. So that's been our review of the Perodua Myvi 1.3G with ASA. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon so you're notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you've been staying safe. Take care. Jangan bodoh.